I don't know. It's just a 3rd, 4th, 5th October surprise. Is it the final one?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
I mean, this election has been maddening, and now it's just completely perplexing, right? Cybersecurity expert Timothy Edgar is kind enough to race to the TV studio here today to try to explain to us what in the heck has happened in this presidential race and with this FBI review. It's not really an open investigation. We don't even know what it is, but we know there's a process going on, and Congress has been alerted, and that was like a clarion call to all of the free world that Hillary Clinton had some trouble in this race when everyone thought she had it locked up. Good evening. Nice to have you aboard. So much to do, so little time to do it. There's only one real local story that I wanted to get to today, so let's go over to the rundown camera and talk about this for a second, because it's important. Speaker of the House is going to be our guest here on Thursday. It all began with this. This is an email, I'm sorry, a real mail, snail mail, you know, the old-fashioned thing in your mailbox. Shauna Lawton. She is the former Republican candidate for District 15 in Cranston, the seat of House Speaker Nick Mattiello, who of course is running for re-election. She sent this mailer, Things I Learned on the Campaign Trail. And all of this Captain Obvious stuff that she checks off here is information she should have had before she decided to run. But over the course of time, she actually learned that she thinks Nick Mattiello is a pretty competent guy, and that Steve Frias, her opponent, do we have a picture of Steve? I don't know. He'll be in here later this week. Steve Frias is not a good guy in her mind. Now, I don't know about the internal politics, so there he is. Thank you. Okay. Stephen is the guy that the Republican establishment, if you can call that in Rhode Island, you know, those who meet in a phone booth, actually support. Okay? So Shauna puts this mailer out, and I bring her on the radio show immediately within 24 hours. We have a little headline that reflects on that, I think. And I ask her, okay, these mailers are expensive, you know, a couple, $3,000 usually. Who gave you the money since you have like a negative account balance in your tiny little account? Now remember, this woman got 120 votes in the primary, all right? We are not talking about the presidential race here. 120 votes. So I said, okay, so the Friends of Shauna Lawton are supporting the Speaker of the House now. Who funded this?
Campaign finance reports will be out in January.
Well, why don't you just tell me, who gave you the money to do this?
I don't need to tell you. Supporters to Friends of Shauna Lawton.
I don't need to tell you. I do not eat green eggs and ham. Sam, I am. Anyway, so she was obstinate, like a 5-year-old. I couldn't believe it. Up to this point, I've been fairly impressed with her, despite her poor performance in the primary. Okay, so going along singing the song, on Thursday and Friday of last week, I kept saying to you and to everybody else, you know what? The speaker needs to distance himself from this woman, because it will appear as if there's some kind of collusion. Well, lo and behold, over the weekend, some woman in Coventry who's privy to a Google chat, the internet will always kill you, that occurred between Ms. Lawton and her friends in the HPV vaccine world. Now, what is that? That's the big issue that she appeared on this show for last year, trying to get rid of the HPV vaccine mandate for kids. That's the issue that she says spawned her interest in running for office, because she finally saw the process on Smith Hill. She was angry about it, and she wanted to represent the people. All right, well, she types to the HPV vaccine people that she's met with a campaign operative for Mattiello and asserts that there's kind of this quid pro quo, that the legislation will come back up in a favorable way with this endorsement of the speaker. And that results in Ted Nisi's WPRI.com headline, where Mattiello says, no, it didn't happen. And today's Providence Journal headline, the Journal broke the story, was endorsement by speaker's rival influence peddling. Okay, so now you've got this situation where the speaker has to defend against the assertions that this woman made in a Google chat that she's got some kind of deal going on. The speaker appeared on Gene Valicente's WPR Morning News show today.
I've never met Shauna Lawton. I have said last year the vaccine issue is a health department issue. That's not a legislative issue. We're not going to consider it. Never talked about it. The first time I heard it was late last night. And there's just never been any discussion regarding that. I appreciated her endorsement, but I thought it was not the right way to do it. I would have preferred her to just say, Nick, I'm going to vote for you. She is a constituent. I would have said, thank you, Shauna. Please go out and vote. And if you can get 5 or 10 of your friends to vote for me, please do. I would never have suggested the type of endorsement she did, but I appreciated it. She's a voter, and I get a lot of Republican support.
Look, unless and until this woman identifies who gave her the money, because she didn't self-finance this mailer, unless she does that, the Speaker will be in a position where he will be perceived as in cahoots by the average voter who doesn't really pay attention and just kind of gets the flavor of all of this. My analysis is that this woman, who is way over her head in this race, got her, you know, she was upset with Steve Frias, and she decided that, you know, Mattiello was altogether a better candidate, and she did this mailer, and then she boasted to her old friends in the HPV vaccine world that she had more juice than she actually has, and now she's got herself in a kerfuffle, as Lexi writes. And you know what it's going to do? It's going to tighten what was, for a while, reportedly, a pollable tightened race with the Speaker of the House and Mr. Frias. The Speaker is here on Thursday on Dan York's State of Mind. Make an appointment for that. Mr. Frias, if you could ever get his act and his schedule together, may be coming here this week, too. And there you go. That's all we've got on that one. But it's a mess. More on that tomorrow on the radio at 3 o'clock on WPRO. In the meantime, the nation's a whole lot more concerned with this story, don't you think? Let's take a look at this headline. It's today's headline, and Timothy Edgar, who is a cybersecurity expert, has worked on both sides of the aisle from Washington and works at the Watson Institute. He's a senior fellow there at Brown University. Is my go-to guy on this kind of stuff. Thank you, my friend, for coming in.
Great.
This is, well, what's more complicated, District 15 race or this?
Well, that was a pretty interesting race. You know, you get these kind of things going on at every level.
Right.
And that's actually one reason I was going to talk about. The Justice Department has this long-standing policy of not talking about criminal investigations, and they do that at very, very local races, and then they're supposed to do it at national races.
Well, you know, a good point, because an addendum to this District 15 story is that the GOP chairman now threatens to both go to the Board of Elections to protest the finance mechanisms, I won't waste your time with it, of that mailer, but also go to the feds looking for some, or, you know, the Attorney General's office. And even if they took the case, they wouldn't admit
tell us
they were taking the case.
They certainly wouldn't tell us that they'd opened a case. They wouldn't tell us that they were interviewing witnesses. They wouldn't give us an up-to-date on what was going on. And generally, when the government decides not to prosecute somebody or decides not to recommend prosecution, you never know about it. You don't hear about it. Whatever the reasons are. You only hear about it if they do go forward with the case, and then it becomes public.
All right. We're going to take a break here and come back and reset this whole situation and go through the blow-by-blow as much as we know. Stay with us. All right, you got our kind of cursory general Justice Department doesn't do this kind of stuff, but let me just brief you in case you're not briefed. How could you not be briefed? Why FBI Director James Comey was able to defy Justice bosses on Clinton email announcement. I'm not exactly sure why. I've read the story, though, and our guest will comment on that. But here's what we had at press time early afternoon on the case.
Donald Trump continued to hammer Hillary Clinton over the FBI's discovery of new emails relating to the investigation of her private server.
I think that's called the mother lode. I think they found them all.
CBS News has learned the Bureau found them on a computer shared by Clinton's top aide, Huma Abedin, and her estranged husband, Anthony Weiner. Weiner is being investigated for allegedly sending sexually explicit texts to an underage girl.
We never thought we were going to say thank you to Anthony Weiner.
But Director Comey's letter to Congress revealing the discovery was vague, saying only that the Bureau doesn't know whether the material is significant or not.
It's pretty strange to put something like that out with such little information right before an election.
It's not yet clear how the discovery will impact voters' decisions, but initial indicators are that it may not change any minds. CBS News asked voters in key states this weekend their thoughts, and 71% say it won't change their mind or they've already voted.
There aren't a lot of people kind of sloshing between the two candidates, and 22 million or so votes have already been cast.
The Clinton campaign is doing all it can to make sure its supporters head to the polls.
Are any of you going to be distracted?
A CBS News battleground tracker poll shows Clinton with leads in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Colorado. Trump is up in Arizona.
You know, it's interesting, the 71% number. Now,
Yeah.
I don't generally ask you for political analysis, but the other number is 29%. And in a race that reportedly was tightening anyway, 29% could be affected by this, means the shift could absolutely happen.
Sure. I mean, you never can predict what's going to happen. It certainly makes the issue more prominent in people's minds, even though there really isn't any more information. You know, people were concerned about Hillary Clinton setting up a private server that, you know, may have mishandled classified information, and she seems to have gotten over that, and now we're talking about it again. So even if it doesn't change anybody's mind about what she did, it makes them think about it more.
The original headline that I put up there, why the FBI director was able to defy the justice bosses, it's interesting. The story in the Washington Post says that Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, the Justice Department, could have stopped this advisory, this letter to the congressional leadership from Director Comey advising that he got these emails, was alerted to it, and now, FYI, we're looking into them. They could have, but they didn't. They too were in a very nuanced place, weren't they?
That's right, because the Attorney General, you know, seemed compromised by this meeting she had with Bill Clinton on an airplane several months ago, and this is the reason that Comey went out and disclosed all of this information about the investigation, which is very unusual. The reason he did that is because he wanted everybody to understand that this was a law enforcement decision, that they had looked at the evidence, that they had made a decision that no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case, and that this was not influenced by political considerations or by the Attorney General or any of those other matters. But once he opened that door, he got on a slippery slope, which has led to today, because now that he's disclosed so much about the investigation, he felt like he had to go back and correct the record, because he said they closed it, and now they're looking for a search warrant for another computer. So he felt like he had to correct it, and that really was the door he opened.
Reportedly, and I say reportedly in quotes because the mainstream press is working their fannies off trying to get to the bottom of the dynamics, and they are well sourced inside government. The FBI is, it would be an understatement to call it a turbulent place right now, reportedly. That there are folks who are arguing different sides of the same coin and different sides of the story at this point. It's an agency that we so rely on that's in turmoil.
I think that's right, and I think that's partly because of misjudgments that Director Comey has made. You know, those rules are there for a reason. You can't predict how people are going to react to some kind of explosive story. And so what you want to do is follow a policy. And that's actually what got Clinton in trouble. She didn't follow the policy around using a work email for work purposes. And then it became something much bigger. Comey didn't follow the policy about not commenting on investigations, and now it's become something much bigger. So I think he was doing it for all the right motives, but it has thrown the FBI into some degree of turmoil, because you know, you just don't want to have a criminal investigation playing out in real time just a few days before an election.
You know, the Secretary of State with her, gee, isn't it a surprise, 9 days, 11 days in front of an election. She's got to be really careful the way she plays that. I mean, she should be feeling somewhat circumstantially hurt. If I was advising her, I'd say, listen, play the role of circumstantially hurt by this. Don't start rolling your eyes like all of a sudden Comey's on the other side when for all this time you were supporting his independent thinking.
I think that's exactly right. I think it's a mistake to make Comey the villain here. If you're the Clinton people, I understand why they're frustrated with him. I think he made a mistake that turned out to hurt them. But to make him the villain, I think, is a bad idea. What you want to say is, look, this is the guy who said, don't prosecute me. Nobody would prosecute me for this. This was a mistaken judgment. This wasn't a crime. Now they found some more information, and they're going to be looking at it, and we're happy that they're doing that. And, you know, we would like them to tell us more about it as soon as they can. Make it the Republicans who are misconstruing what he sent, the letter that he sent, rather than him, as the people you criticize.
All right, when we come back, you know, our guest is expert on the cyber aspect of this. Let's remember that it's emails and it's that technology, and we'll try to get our grip around Anthony. Well, we'll be right back.
We should heed the words of Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Give the people the facts and the republic will be saved." We call on the FBI to immediately release all the emails pertinent to their reopened investigation.
You know, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
The Clinton campaign, if they've got nothing to hide, should be screaming at the top of their lungs for that.
Yes, and they have been.
I don't know that it's almost as if everyone's playing a game here that they know will never end up being played out, because if the FBI is doing its job, they're not going to double down on a mistake and start doing a daily press conference.
Certainly
or
not.
exposing the evidence or describing the evidence, correct? Or characterizing it.
Well, I think this is, again, the slippery slope he got on. You know, he gave a lot of detail about the investigation in July, and that's what led to the letter last Friday, because he felt like he had to correct it. But now that he said this vague, huge thing right before the election of there might be something, I think both sides are legitimately saying, well, what is it? Is there anything? And the answer is we don't have any idea if there's anything. There probably isn't. You know, this is just a bunch of emails on somebody's computer that they didn't look at before, and they have to see if there's anything new. They may even already have these emails. We just don't know. So there are people now that they have gotten a search warrant for it, that are going through that process. And, you know, it would be crazy to go through it and start issuing updates of, you know, this is what we found over the past 8 hours. That's not the way you conduct a criminal investigation.
But it's interesting because I'm sure you're talking to friends in Washington. You're connected down there. That's where you hail from and your expertise spawns from. I'm sure you're hearing from guys and gals down there going, "This is not what we do. We don't write letters to Congress like this." But you can't double and triple down on other things that we don't do. At some juncture, you've got to do what the FBI is supposed to do, and that is to shut this thing down, say nothing. I mean, I never get anything on the record from the FBI in an investigation, ever, 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 ever. So somewhere along the line, you got to do the right thing. Both campaigns know that. So both are calling for all this stuff to be exposed. Trump doesn't want to see it exposed because the chances are there's not a lot there.
That's right.
Hillary's dying for it, unless Huma is actually, you know, banging away classified information on her estranged husband's laptop that she reportedly says, if you believe the sources, she didn't even know had those emails on it.
That's right. Well, people don't understand the technology. You know, we have a new...
So talk to me about the technology.
We have a new executive master in cybersecurity at Brown University precisely because of this. She's checking things on her web browser. She probably doesn't understand that creates some sort of backup on her files. You know, she's probably allowed to do that. I mean, there was all sorts of chaos in how email was being managed in the government when I was there. You know, everybody sort of acts like it was so obvious that Hillary Clinton wasn't allowed to do what she did. Well, it wasn't as obvious as it should have been. You know, there were all sorts of conflicting rules.
Because so many people were recipients of her communications for all that time, and no one said, hey, by the way, she can't send this to me from there, right?
Some people were raising questions, other people weren't. Some people had old email addresses from a long time ago. Many of these policies hadn't been up to date. That's one of the things we were trying to do in the Obama years, and we did some of that over time, but it takes a long time to do that in government. So, you know, one thing we've definitely learned from this past year is that we have to have a lot better handle on where our data is, how is it secured, and the policies that we're using to just understand where it is.
I think we got to clarify for anybody, and you're better to do it than me, about this cycle of email news that we have had. This is out of Hillary Clinton officialdom, for lack of a better term, her use of a private server for official business. The WikiLeaks, via reportedly Russian espionage, is the DNC, meaning the National Committee of the Politics, mostly through the mind and soul and server of John Podesta, the chairperson of the Hillary Clinton campaign. Those things have been interesting but unimpressive in terms of their damage politically, correct?
I would say so, and part of it is, you look at WikiLeaks and Podesta and all this, there haven't really been a huge number of interesting revelations. It's always interesting to see what people are saying and to get sort of the flavor of how does that go on behind the scenes.
Some turbulence, talking about Catholics, that upset the bishops, there's stuff out there,
right?
But no smoking guns.
Exactly, and I think that one question about going back to the investigation again, the FBI has multiple investigations going on. One of them is into Russian hacking of the DNC and other Russian attempts to influence our elections. And we're told that some of those may involve Trump officials. Paul Manafort had very close ties to the former president of Ukraine, who's a big friend of Putin. They're not giving us updates on those investigations, and they shouldn't be. So,
That's a really good point.
When you have the FBI looking into these kinds of things, you want them to be quiet about it unless there's actually going to be some kind of case brought. One thing that my friends back in the government say, the government speaks through our indictments. The government speaks through the courts. That means we're not supposed to be leaking. We're not supposed to be talking about investigations. We're supposed to be gathering evidence confidentially without talking about it. And then if there's a crime, we bring it into court, and that's where we speak.
Yet the very reported worry that the FBI director Comey had was that the new look-see into Uma's emails off of her estranged husband's laptop would leak.
That's right.
And that's the problem.
And that's right, and that's part of the reason I don't think for a minute that Comey is trying to act like he's some sort of partisan here. I think actually he's trying to protect the integrity of the FBI and their independence. But a lot of it goes back to that initial decision he made in July to speak so openly about the Clinton server investigation because he wanted people to understand that they were trying to call it out as they saw it. And that turned out to have created a lot of problems for him now.
In the meantime, Donald Trump, we don't have time to play anything, but Donald Trump, is talking about major crimes, convictions, Watergate, da-da-da, 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 da-da-da.
To be clear, there hasn't even been a recommendation for looking into a prosecution by the FBI. So, to sort of lob around questions about crimes, what crimes? The way we decide whether or not there are crimes in this country is that a prosecutor brings a case and then the jury decides. Here, the FBI hasn't even recommended that a prosecutor bring a case. So we're way, exaggerating when we say things like that.
As much as you can muster your expertise and objectivity combined, give me a 20-second piece of advice to the viewers as to how they should view this whole case to date.
I think that we really haven't had any new information that we didn't already know. We knew about what Clinton did with the email server. We knew that there was some criticism of how she did that, and voters should make a judgment about whether that matters. And there's nothing they know now that they didn't know, say, a month ago to make that judgment.
What happens in the next 8 days?
Who knows? I mean, this has been such a crazy election that there might be 3 or 4 things that happen in the next 8 days. My guess is that there will be some additional perspective on this issue, and that we're not going to be talking about, Hillary Clinton's emails in 5 days, but who knows?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Final word coming up. At least the Cubbies won and gave their incredibly devoted fans a chance to celebrate, right? We go to Game 6. And by the way, they've got the pitching to steal 2 in Cleveland. Ought to be very interesting. Happy Halloween. See you tomorrow. Bye.